Coming up on The World Today. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden warns that people may die if his incoming administration continues to be obstructed by incumbent Donald Trump. A powerful hurricane hits Nicaragua's Caribbean coast just 2 weeks after another devastating storm hit the country. Plus, the United Nations warns that the conflict in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region is developing into a full-scale humanitarian crisis. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. We begin today in the United States, where President-elect Joe Biden has warned that people may die if President Donald Trump continues to stall the transition process. Mr. Biden adds that coordination is needed to tackle the coronavirus outbreak. He called President Donald Trump's refusal to acknowledge he lost the election, despite calls to do so from both sides, totally irresponsible. The Trump campaign launched a flurry of legal challenges in the wake of the November 3rd vote to contest ballot counts.
If we have to wait until January 20th to start that planning, it puts us behind over a month and a half. And so it's important that it be done, that there be coordination now or as rapidly as we can get that done. I wouldn't hesitate to get the vaccine, but I also want to set an example. But I wouldn't hesitate to get the vaccine if, in fact, Dr. Fauci and these two organizations, whether it's Moderna or Pfizer, who have been extremely responsible, conclude that it is safe and able to be done. They strongly urge that if, in fact, we're going to have Thanksgiving with anyone, that we limit it to a maximum. They suggest 5 people, maximum 10 people, socially distanced wearing masks, and people who have quarantined.
Well, let's get more on this story from VOA's White House Bureau Chief, Steve Herman. He joins us now from Virginia. Steve, welcome to the program.
My pleasure.
So tell us, how is the White House reacting to Joe Biden's warning that people may die if President Donald Trump continues to stall the transition process?
It has been quite silent on that. The president has really only spoken via Twitter and not rebutting Joe Biden, but rather still questioning the validity of the election, the votes, the balloting, the vote counting, et cetera, and not recognizing Joe Biden as the president-elect. The vice president, Mike Pence, meanwhile, has been pushing ahead with meetings of the White House coronavirus task force, but also has not commented on Biden's statements.
Well, the president has launched a number of legal challenges to have the courts overturn votes in some key states. So how is that going?
They're not going very well for the president and the Republican Party. A number of those cases earlier on were quickly thrown out by judges. Others have been withdrawn by the plaintiffs themselves. Now, there is one court action happening in a few hours in the state of Pennsylvania, where the former New York City mayor and ally of the president, Rudy Giuliani, is supposed to appear and speak on the president's behalf as one of his lawyers in that courtroom. So we'll see what happens with that one.
And Steve, finally, we understand that the Georgia Secretary of State says he is being pressured by Senator Lindsey Graham to discard some ballots in Georgia. Is there any truth to this?
Well, the senator is denying that. He confirms he had a conversation with the Georgia Secretary of State, but that conversation has been mischaracterized. What's interesting is that a Republican official in Georgia is also really pushing back against the president, essentially saying he's been lying on Twitter about the vote process and the counting and all of that, something we've really not heard Republicans bluntly say now or even during the past 4 years.
Well, I mean, we'll be keeping an eye on the situation there to see how it progresses. But Steve, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Meanwhile, Nigerians in America have concerns regarding the potential challenges with the U.S. transition of presidential power. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, has more on this.
The U.S. election ended more than 10 days ago, and the president of the U.S. has yet to concede, despite the election results that project Joe Biden as the next president of the U.S. Most recently, President Trump tweeted he won because the election was rigged, and later tweeting, "I concede nothing." Nigerians in the U.S. called to question this type of response from an American president.
I think what is happening right now with the U.S. elections is an anathema to democracy. We had an election. Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris, they were able to garner 306 electoral votes. Donald Trump was supposed to just go on national TV, address the nation, and gracefully concede the election. Instead, what we have had is an effort to basically just discredit the concept of U.S. democracy itself. The electoral system that we are talking about is very secure. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security has already rated it the most secure election in history. Senna heads to prevail. We need to return to sanity, and we need to stop this rake mockery. It is time that President Biden is allowed to start running a non-inclusive transition process, which will involve current officials of the U.S. government.
A week after the election has been called, the current president refused to concede or acknowledge that he has lost the election. So it's a very tumultuous period right now, and we just hope this will be over sooner rather than later. From a Nigerian-American point of view, I think that the Trump administration has not been a friend of the immigrant community like myself. He has been extremely hostile to us, and I would give this administration a 5. The relationship has not been great.
While the U.S. is still in the midst of lawsuits regarding election practices, the president of Nigerians and the diaspora organization, The Americas, has hope for Africa-U.S. relations within the projected Biden-Harris administration.
Yes, the Nigerians in Diaspora organization is very happy and glad with the outcome of the recently concluded U.S. presidential election. Nigerians in the community work tirelessly with other African nations in the U.S. community to elect the next president of the United States. We are willing, ready, and we're happy, to work with the next administration to put in measures that will positively affect Nigerians and the entire African community in the United States, as well as continuing to contribute to the growth and sustainability of the American economy. Yeah, looking at your question.
Even though President Trump holds on to the possibility for a second term, many Nigerians in the U.S. are beginning to plan for the future, with Joe Biden as the U.S. president-elect. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channels Television News.
The former U.S. President Barack Obama says he is thrilled that former Vice President Joe Biden won the presidential election, and he hopes the president-elect would set a different tone for cooperation between Democrats and Republicans. Mr. Obama said this while speaking to talk show host Oprah Winfrey to mark the publication of his forthcoming memoir, A Promised Land.
I would distinguish between the very real policy differences that exist between Democrats and Republicans, and some legitimate, tough issues, whether it's abortion or it's taxes. People have different views, and democracy is always going to be contentious. I distinguish between that and the demonization of opponents, the flouting of institutional norms and rules that govern how our democracy is supposed to function. The kinds of things that I saw over the last 4 years that endanger democracy operating the way it should. Yeah. And I think that what Joe and Kamala can do is to level set, to reestablish that we don't use the Justice Department, for example, to go after political enemies.
Meanwhile, Hurricane Iota has made landfall in Nicaragua just 2 weeks after another devastating storm hit. The U.S. National Hurricane Center, or NHC, says the storm crossed the coast on Monday evening. It had strengthened at sea to a Category 5 storm before making landfall, with maximum sustained winds of up to 160 miles per hour. As it struck Nicaragua, it weakened to a Category 4, but the NHC says it remains extremely dangerous. In its latest update, the agency warned of catastrophic winds, life-threatening storm surge, and torrential rainfall. Iota is the strongest Atlantic hurricane of the year and only the second November hurricane to reach Category 5. The last was in 1932. The World Health Organization remains cautiously optimistic on the development of COVID-19 vaccines, despite the encouraging news about recent test results. Now, that's according to the Director General, Tedros Ghebreyesus. Moderna, an American biotechnology company, announced on Monday that its coronavirus vaccine is 94.5% effective against the virus. The announcement came a week after Pfizer and BioNTech reported that their vaccine candidate was 90% effective.
This is not the time for complacency. While we continue to receive encouraging news about COVID-19 vaccines and remain cautiously optimistic about the potential for new tools to start to arrive in the coming months, right now, we're extremely concerned by the surge in cases we're seeing in some countries, particularly in Europe and the Americas. Health workers and health systems are being pushed to the breaking point.
But there are many questions still remaining about the duration of protection, the impact on severe disease, the impact on different subpopulations, especially the elderly, as well as the adverse events beyond a certain period of time. So we also hope that the clinical trials will continue to collect data, because that's really going to be important for us to know about in the long term.
Still to come on The World Today. Thanksgiving arrives early for hundreds of Los Angeles students and their families as a local charity distributes food baskets. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says 11 council areas are to move from level 3 to level 4 coronavirus restrictions. She says the change will take place from 6 p.m. on Friday and will be a strictly limited period. While acknowledging that the news is disappointing, she says the end is within grasp. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
For 3 weeks from Friday, 11 areas in Scotland will move to level 4 of COVID rules, the toughest restrictions, similar to the full lockdown imposed earlier in the year. 19 areas will see no change, while 2 will move from level 3 to level 2. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says it's hoped that by imposing tougher measures now, people might be able to enjoy Christmas with more freedom. In other developments, a government minister, Robert Jenrick, says England's post-lockdown tier system is being reviewed after an advisor said it may need to be tougher. The number of weekly deaths in England and Wales mentioning COVID-19 on the death certificate has reached its highest level since May. Meanwhile, Downing Street says Prime Minister Boris Johnson has tested negative for coronavirus but will remain in self-isolation. Prime Minister Johnson has been self-isolating after an MP he hosted at Downing Street last Thursday tested positive for the virus. A second national coronavirus lockdown is coming into effect in Austria after earlier measures failed to contain rising infections. It will last until at least December the 6th. South Korea has announced stricter social distancing rules for the Greater Seoul area a month after easing them, warning of an even bigger crisis if anti-COVID-19 efforts fail to dampen a spike in new cases. Tighter curbs will ban public gatherings of 100 people or more, limit religious services and audiences at sporting events to 30% capacity. And finally, France's health minister says the country is regaining control over the coronavirus, but is not ready to ease the second national lockdown imposed to rein in the disease. After hitting a peak of 86,852 new infections per day on November the 7th, the rate has dropped sharply, with the total reaching a more than 1 month low on Monday at 9,406. However, the number of people hospitalized for COVID-19 has reached an all-time high of 33,497, even though the 7-day moving average of additional hospitalizations, presently at 339, has steadily gone down since the beginning of the month, when it peaked at more than 1,000.
The U.S. media is reporting that President Donald Trump asked senior advisors last Thursday about potential options for attacking Iran's main nuclear site. The advisors, however, warned him that military action could spark a broader conflict. The White House has not commented on the accounts of the meeting, which took place a day after the global nuclear watchdog said Iran's enriched uranium stockpile was 12 times what it was permitted under a 2015 nuclear deal. The landmark accord saw the U.S. and 5 other world powers give Iran relief from crippling economic sanctions in return for limits on sensitive activities to show it was not developing nuclear weapons. President Trump, however, abandoned the deal in 2018, saying it was defective at its core. Germany's Europe Minister Michael Roth has asked Poland and Hungary to act responsibly after the two countries blocked the EU's €1.8 trillion financial package needed to revive an economy depressed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Budapest and Warsaw blocked the adoption of the package because the budget law included a clause which makes access to money conditional on respecting the rule of law. The country's nationalist governments are against the move because they are under a formal EU process investigating them for undermining the independence of courts, media, and non-governmental organizations.
Our citizens in all member states count on our support. There are no excuses for further delays. So I ask everyone in the EU to live up to their responsibility. It's not the time for vetoes, but for acting swiftly and in the spirit of solidarity. Our people would pay a very high price for a blockade.
3 people have been arrested in Germany over a dramatic diamond heist last year that targeted one of Europe's largest treasure collections. The suspects are accused of stealing more than a dozen diamond-encrusted items from the Dresden Green Vault in the east of the country. Saxony's ruler, Augustus the Strong, created the collection in 1723 in what is one of the world's oldest museums. Police have also raided homes in Berlin as part of the investigation. Meanwhile, the United Nations Refugee Agency says a major humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Ethiopia, with more than 27,000 people now having fled heavy fighting in Sudan. The UN adds that the pace of the exodus, about 4,000 a day, may also indicate huge uprooting of people within the Tigray region. Sudan already hosts nearly 1 million refugees, including those who have fled conflict and poverty in Chad, Eritrea, Central African Republic, and South Sudan.
Refugees who are now arriving at the pace of 4,000 per day are coming out of Ethiopia really scared, afraid, with the stories saying that they have been fleeing heavy fighting, and there's no sign of the fighting to stop right now. So the fear is, as the fighting continues, we could see more refugees arriving. The number of 27,000 or more than that is what we have registered. It could reach 30,000 and beyond. The UN Refugee Agency is warning that a full-scale humanitarian crisis is unfolding as thousands of refugees flee ongoing fighting in Ethiopia's Tigray region each day to seek safety in eastern Sudan. This is an influx unseen over the last 2 decades in this part of Sudan.
We fear, not least based on the movement of people out of the country, that there may be massive displacement inside Tigray. So that is, of course, a concern, and we try to prepare the best way possible. We are in continuous contact at relevant levels, both with the federal government and the relevant regional authorities.
And finally on the program, Thanksgiving arrived early for hundreds of Los Angeles students and their families on Monday, when a local charity distributed food baskets with ingredients for a traditional holiday feast. Families and school representatives lined up to pick up their bags containing a frozen turkey, fresh potatoes, carrots, fruits, stuffing, dressing, corn, and beans. Families without the means to cook a full dinner could choose a gift card instead. The North Valley YMCA in the San Fernando Valley area of Los Angeles distributed the baskets in partnership with local school principals who identified the families in need, and local sponsors who provided funding to purchase groceries.
You know, it's very hard because now all the kids are in their houses, and it's more difficult for the families. And I think what they're doing, they do it every year, but this is more important and more significant because some people can't afford or can't have food on their table every day.
I've been coming for the last 4 years. I really appreciate what they're doing for the families at this time because of the virus, but you know, people are looking out and providing for each other at this time, and that's a good thing. We're all coming together as a big family.
Clearly, there's great need like every year. This is our 14th year, but this year the demand is even greater.
Well, it's always nice to see people giving back to the community. That's all for the program today. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.